Good morning. I'm so glad to be here to share this morning with you, and to everyone joining us on our virtual campus. I'm glad you're here too. As Linda told you, I'm Bill Reganini, and I serve gratefully as the president of your Board of Trustees. And over the years, it's been my pleasure to serve and hopefully be of some use on various committees and teams, some of which don't exist anymore since they've run their course, while others continue on. I've served as a worship associate, a strategic planning and oversight committee member, a budget subcommittee member. I've served on the pledge drive, the social media team, the second incarnation of the vision implementation team. I've taught religious exploration classes for our kids, and also our whole lives, our age-appropriate comprehensive sexuality curriculum. I co-chaired the ministerial search team, which suggested that the congregation call Reverend Tim as minister, and this is my third stint on the Board of Trustees. Now, I've rattled off that list not in search of a pat on the back or to solicit compliments. I did it to say thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be of use and for showing me how to offer and receive ministry and teaching me how to care and nurture a Unitarian Universalist heart. Now, we all have our sagas about the past, but I'd like to tell you about my journey that brought me here and why I stick by this religion that sometimes makes me uncomfortable and sometimes leaves me wanting more. I wound up leaving home at age 14, and I set off on my own full of anger and resentment because I didn't trust life for lots of different reasons. And I wore that bitterness as a badge of courage and wandered rather aimlessly through a spiritual purgatory, as I call it, searching for a gathering place with people I could trust. And periodically, I'd attempt to spiritually reconnect through various venues, but what I tended to find were places that said, here are the answers. So come in, listen to us, be like us, and you'll be saved. Well, I found no solace there, but my bigger problem was that the bitterness that I carried with me persisted. And it continued to cloud my daily outlook. You know that old adage about what were once vices are now habits? That was me. Well, years later, after my wife Trish and I decided to start a family, I began my spiritual search again in earnest. For I felt that I was ill-equipped with the insight and the knowledge and the temperament necessary to guide my sons through a spiritually meaningful existence. And I didn't want them to wind up like me, leading a journey fueled by anger and mistrust. Well, then one day I read a report in the Fresno Bee about a One Nation Under God rally in downtown Fresno, led by city officials, by the way, in response to a hot-button issue of the time, a non-existent effort by liberals to remove the phrase "under God" from the Pledge of Allegiance. You remember that? And the article said some troublemaker named Brian Jessup from the Unitarian Universalist Church of Fresno had shown up with a sign reading, "Under God, what does it mean and to whom?" The article went on to say that Brian's message was received, shall we say, less than graciously by the crowd. And I thought to myself, someone advocating religious tolerance in Fresno. I need to check this place out. Now, Sunday mornings had become a time for sleeping in my house, but the next Sunday I got up early, and Trish was still in bed, and drowsily muttered, "Where are you going?" And I matter-of-factly said, "I'm going to church." And she sat bolt upright in bed, wagged a finger at me and said, "That was a good one. You had me going there for a minute. I thought you said you were going to church." No, come on, really, where are you going? And I said, I'm going to church. And I left her with a look of worry on my face that I've only seen just a few times, either before or since. The day she put each of our sons on the school bus for the first time, and the day each of them came home with their driver's license. And the rest is history. Brian's act of passive resistance caught my attention and brought me to your door, but it's all of you who have compelled me to keep coming back. From religious education to our social justice efforts, to the community leadership roles we undertake, and now reaching out via technology, beyond the physical limitations of the sanctuary to provide spiritual nourishment, I'm still constantly amazed at what I've learned from you about how my heart has grown. Now, over time, gradually involving myself in different areas of the church, sometimes by invitation and sometimes by crashing the party, I'll be honest, I was learning my first lessons about being in covenant with blessed community. And I began to experience a shift. And it didn't involve the laying on of hands or speaking in tongues because, well, let's face it, that's just not our style. Although that does have a certain flamboyance that appeals to me on certain levels, but I digress. My point is, the ripening and growth wasn't occurring due to any grandiose, broad, sweeping gestures. That hard, flinty, defensive coating encasing my heart was starting to crack, and the cultivation of my Unitarian Universalist heart was underway. So, almost 20 years ago now, I walked into our cozy little brown church that was then located on Millbrook Avenue, and I walked in a bruised and belligerent I. But in time, with a lot of work, the I began turning into we. Now, please understand, my transition hasn't been easy. At times, it's been teeth-gnashingly frustrating. But that's part of what appeals to me about Unitarian Universalism. There's no pretense of providing answers. We are the institutionalization of religious freedom. We say out loud in our creedless membership requirements that the specifics of our beliefs or even our own personal spiritual practices do not need to conform to one another. What matter are our relationships. Our 7 Unitarian Universalist principles are all about our relationships. You're invited to come in and listen, be yourself, and we'll help you work through your questions. And I so appreciate being given the freedom to torment myself with these questions. Why try to make sense of it all? Is it worth it? Will I ever find what I'm searching for? And if I do, will I realize it? How am I supposed to know if I found it if I don't even know what I'm looking for? Is the universe trustworthy enough to give me a sign so I know when to blow the whistle and say enough is enough? Breathe, Bill. Breathe. Breathe. But when I do go careening off into that abyss from time to time, I think it actually does some good. Because when I come out the other side and reevaluate things, I can see my transformation, my evolution and sometimes de-evolution more clearly. Hopefully enough to take advantage of those brief moments of insight where both my mind and my heart are open to growth and acceptance, an opportunity to notice the sacred in the ordinary. And I realize that, yeah, there may be pain and anger in my search, but there's also joy and wisdom to be found. My trouble is, when in the midst of this transformation, I often perceive it as crisis. But when the crisis is followed by appropriate response, I feel the universe and I are kind of holding each other to account. So see, turns out the universe needs me too. I just need to calm down enough to realize that. But I do now tend to enjoy the challenge rather than simply endure it. Homespun philosopher Wendell Berry says, it may be that when we no longer know what to do, we have come to our real work. And that when we no longer know which way to go, we have come to our real journey. The mind that is not baffled is not employed. The impeded stream is the one that sinks. The impeded stream is the one that sinks. Does that stream water know where it's going? Well, yeah, downhill, but how it gets there is very much undecided. And it's the impediments that make it sing, that creates the magic. Like Stolen Thunder sang to us in the prelude this morning, the magic's in the learning. And it's important to keep looking for that magic wherever you may find it or however you may define it. And that's what Unitarian Universalism offers me. It celebrates things not being clear-cut. It helps give me a gut sense of direction rather than a path of destination. It leaves it up to me to organize the pieces and the concepts in a way that makes sense to me. And my heart has to work at it. But when you work a muscle, it grows stronger, more coordinated, and more in tune with the other muscles and organ systems that surround it, reminiscent of our seventh principle, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. But at the same time, I have to be mindful of our first principle, honor the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Every person, not just the ones who agree with me, as Reverend Tim reminded us in a recent sermon. And again, I'm not saying it's been easy for me, especially in these divisive times when cancel culture is rampant. But I'm learning to choose not to do that hastily. Treating those with whom I disagree with decency and respect is essential if I expect any progress. I can stay safe and warm in my self-righteousness and wash them in my judgment, or reach out with a gesture of respect. Now, I understand that's a two-way street and they have to be willing to accept it, but I have to do more than just rattle off my issues list at them. Otherwise, what can I expect? Except for them to perceive me as some sort of a threat. And what does that gain for either of us? And what hope is there for progress if I'm not willing to at least listen? As writer Paul Coelho says, the world is changed by your example, not by your opinion. Now, this is especially hard for me to do as someone who still bears some emotional scars from dogmatic religious childhood experiences. And as enamored as I am with Unitarian Universalism, I have to remember that our religion doesn't have a corner on the market for compassion and philanthropy. And I shouldn't dismiss these gifts from others just because they may come wrapped in different packages than what I'm used to. So I try to remember the lesson of military chaplain Captain George Tyner, who says, whatever religious tradition you call your own, you'll probably find religious diversity even within it. Sound familiar? We can believe we mean the same things when we use highly charged theological terms like God, Christ, atonement, salvation. These words convey layers of meaning, not discrete definitions. And it's important to remember this and do our own mental translations as we communicate with each other. He continues, that is what I call being religiously multilingual. You need not accept someone else's language as your own. You don't even have to speak another language fluently, but you should try to understand enough that you can carry on a meaningful conversation, build mutual understanding, and forge lasting relationships across religious differences. Every such conversation is an opportunity to move the world toward peace. I love that line that he wrote. And I'll give you a for instance. I decided to not turn the whole Happy Holidays versus Merry Christmas dispute into a melodrama. Because if I'm quibbling over the words someone uses to wish me peace and goodwill, well, then maybe I'm part of the problem. Now, you may or may not agree with me, but I get to choose where that line is for me, and I choose not to squander an opportunity for goodwill by taking issue with the wording of the salutation, and instead take Captain Tyner's advice to embrace the underlying meaning and not the discrete definition. Now, the same thing happens if I interpret the Christian Great Commandment by replacing the Lord our God with the word life. Try it on for size. You shall love life with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength. This is a much more comforting and manageable interpretation for me, and I actually think that's what the teacher Jesus had in mind when he related the Great Commandment. Love life with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength. He didn't say anything about understanding any of it, but I think what he was telling us was you have to trust life. You need to have a willingness to embrace and work with what is, because I can't shape reality according to my will, but whether I'm transformed by it or crushed by it is my choice. I can close my heart in fear and pay the price, or I can open my heart and trust life to help me. And to me, there's something to be said about a loving energy. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've experienced a loving energy. Has anyone else ever experienced a loving energy by your own personal definition of what a loving energy might be? Yeah, I thought so. Well, who's to say that loving energy can't be interpreted as the Lord our God by someone else? Not me, but maybe by someone else. But what I can do on a daily basis is to choose to use my heart, my soul, my mind, and my strength as a point of connection, a point of love through which life can enter and do the rest. And it's not a matter of being right, it's a matter of being good, of recognizing the good in others and being willing and able to help nurture the spirit and action of others for a common good. Another, for instance, I'm embarrassed about this story. A good friend of mine is involved in a nonprofit organization to finance the digging of wells in sub-Saharan African villages so that the children in the villages don't have to spend their days fetching jugs of water from wells that are sometimes miles away. And when she first asked me to get involved in that project, I balked, because the problem I rationalized was that the NPO was established on a fundamentalist Christian platform. So Jesus was getting credit for supplying the water, and he never even showed up for the meetings. But now, with a clearer mind and intent, I'm embarrassed to admit my short-sighted attitude. But what I came to realize is that my judgment was killing my love. And as far as the whole Jesus thing goes, well, actually, Unitarian Universalism as a religion emerged somewhat from the teachings of Jesus. So I can think of worse role models. And speaking of role models, instrumental to the care and nurture of my Unitarian Universalist heart is what I've learned about giving and receiving love from a support group I was invited to join called FIT, which stands for Families in Transition. And it's a grassroots group of several members of this church who are faced with the complexities of caring for partners and loved ones who are suffering the effects of Alzheimer's and dementia. Now, without going into a symposium about the disease and the devastating effects it has on families, I can offer up that as a caregiver, I ran an emotional gauntlet at times feeling needy, incompetent, overwhelmed, vulnerable, angry, guilt-ridden. But the most destructive emotion I faced was a deep-seated feeling of unworthiness of support. But while going through the same emotional wringer, the resiliency and empathy and wisdom of the people in that group showed me how wrong I was. Because with them, I felt seen and cared for and known for who I am. And they taught me that giving and getting are part of one circuit. They helped me realize that receiving with grace isn't about taking. I now see it as offering someone else the joy of giving. And I'll always be grateful for that lesson. And let me repeat that, because I think that's the most important thing I've said up here. They taught me that giving and getting are part of one circuit. They helped me realize that receiving with grace isn't about taking. I now see it as offering someone else the joy of giving. So, my life is a creative act. And like most creative acts, sometimes it's messy. But if I do say so myself at this point, I think I'm a pretty beautiful wreck. Yeah. But I know that life matters. My life matters because you all matter to me. And as I've been saying, it's a choice. You always have a choice. Any spiritual practice changes the practitioner, but a spiritual practice of choosing change as opposed to being changed is central to what nurtures my Unitarian Universalist heart. Thank you. I offer you blessings for a love-filled year.